Okay.
Hey, I'm Dr. Jerika Dodd, Executive Editor of PharmaSis Magazine, and I am so excited for you to either be joining us live or listening to the replay. This is my opportunity to interview the Myra Fonville, who, oh my gosh, like I could say so many great things about Myra because number one, we graduated from the same College of Pharmacy, different times, but still same College of Pharmacy. And I love, love, love conversations with her because she can give me historical perspective. Like we love digging into history together. And so that's one of the great things that I love about talking to Myra because I learned things that I never even knew about the university that I attended for pharmacy school, which of course is the home of the Rattlers, Florida A&M University. Nonetheless, I want to take the opportunity to interview Myra because she is one of the contributing authors for PharmaSis Magazine for this season, for the next 4 issues, starting with the fall 2022 issue. So welcome, Myra Fonville. How are you doing?
Fine, Jerika. Thanks for having me.
Yes, this is so much fun because when you told me you would be a writer, I was like, yes, this is amazing because Myra is an excellent writer. If you are not already following her somewhere on social media, maybe LinkedIn, Facebook, you got to follow Myra because when she writes, it's prolific. That's what I would say. It's prolific. So, Myra, tell us about your decision to become a contributing author for Facebook. I mean, for Facebook, Lord, for I just spoke about Facebook, for PharmaSis Magazine.
For
Tell us.
pharmacists.
I love it when you go live because you mess up and you got to keep going. So tell us about your decision to become a contributing author for PharmaSis Magazine.
Well, I chose to do it because I wanted to expose more pharmacists, especially female pharmacists, to the world of clinical research. I initially started working as a retail pharmacist, but after 15 years, I decided to transition into clinical research. And I've been doing that for about 25 years now. And it's a whole new world, but I think that it helps. Well, for me anyway, I feel like I utilize more of what learned in pharmacy school working in clinical research. And I think that some people really like that and also like to be able to say, you know what, I worked on a clinical trial for that drug. When a new drug comes out, it's a very rewarding feeling. And so I wanted to expose people who may not be aware of the opportunities in clinical research and exactly what it entails. So I wanted to write about it.
And so, I will say that even just in our warm up time that we had before we went live, you schooled me as you always do, because we were talking about pharmacists in the area of clinical research, and we don't necessarily maybe get a lot of exposure to that in pharmacy school. I think oftentimes, without saying, retail and hospital are what people are very aware of, and then other avenues are kind of as you discover them, or if you may have an elective or something like that. I know my exposure to clinical research was through working in the pharma industry because we used to partner with CRAs and go into research sites as a medical science liaison and have to educate sometimes the CRAs, sometimes we did education for the sites, for the primary investigators. And so I got to see a bit of how clinical research went from the pharma perspective, but I know that there are many other aspects of clinical research that pharmacists get involved in. So I was really excited for you to come write about that in the magazine.
Yeah, so the first article that's going to be in this fall issue, I basically break down the different opportunities that pharmacists can find within the clinical research realm. There are a lot of different possibilities, and so the article touches on each of those and just tells you exactly what it entails, what type of position it is, and just gives you an overall view of that.
So we want to make
I'm not going to
sure
give the whole
to
article away.
Right. Well, we also want to make sure that like students also can tune in and figure out if that may be an area of interest that they want to even go into coming out of pharmacy school, that they might not have been exposed to or just maybe want to know more about. So I'm really excited about this
So
upcoming
true.
article. And so I'll let our audience
Yeah.
know that we have a little bit of a delay, but we were like, we're going to do this interview anyway. So if it looks like there's a delay or like we're kind of stepping over each other's words, it's because of the delay in the internet connection. Nonetheless, Myra also is very outspoken about disparities in health with regard to clinical research. So can you share a little bit about that? And as I said, if you want to see her prolific writing, go follow her on LinkedIn and you can see where she writes about some of these things. But talk about some of the disparities that we see in clinical research.
The main thing is, there's a lack of diversity in clinical trial participants. And, it's kind of like a snowball effect, because the bottom line is when we have more minorities, let's say African Americans or Native Americans or even Hispanics, you know, that particular population has more diabetes than the Caucasians. However, over 75% of clinical trial participants are Caucasian males. So we end up with medications that pharmaceutical companies tell us this is great for your diabetes, but it might not be great for us. It might not be great for our particular ethnic group. And it's not because we're so different, but there are differences in the culture. There's differences in the diets. There are different. I mean, science has even proven that some drugs just work better for different genders or for different races. And reason as to why. But if we don't participate in clinical trials, then we end up with medications that really designed for the multitude who are actually going to be receiving those medications. And so I basically am trying to advocate not just that we are more aware of that, but also just so that those of us within the medical community, and not just pharmacists but even physicians, are more knowledgeable about clinical research and really take the time to educate patients or even be willing to participate and just actually perform the clinical trials at their facilities, because that's what's going to bring about the trust. Because right now, most minorities do not trust taking something experimental, particularly if it's given by somebody of another race. But you're more prone to, be more receptive to that who's worked in your community for the past, 10, 20 years, as opposed to all of a sudden you have someone across town who is paying you to come over and take an experimental drug. It sounds very suspect to a lot of people.
Right. And
The reality is, it's. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Now the reality is, it's beneficial for us, but it's, it will be more well received if it were somebody that you trusted, and that person could also be able to be active enough in the community that they could educate the community. And that's what I'm trying to advocate for.
And I'll tell you, I definitely understand the mistrust in just the medical community in general. So outside of clinical trials, I think that patients oftentimes feel comfortable with practitioners who either look like them or can at least relate to their ethnic group. And so I can imagine that transfers over into clinical trials. I had a coaching client a couple years back who wanted to break into the pharma industry as a medical science liaison. And so this particular company that she was applying for gave her a clinical trial to review. And the clinical trial was a drug that they use for lupus. And I told her, I said, I'm not sure how your interview will go. I said, but either be prepared to answer this question or go in asking the question yourself of the interview panel. You have a drug that's been approved, FDA approved for lupus, but at least 85%, maybe even higher of the population was not even an ethnic minority in the clinical trial. How is this drug,
Right.
how do you position this drug to be a therapy when we know that lupus impacts people of color, especially Black people, impacts at a more a higher rate? How is it that this
Yep.
drug, with this data behind it, how do you march into anybody's office and say you should use this for your patients of color? And lupus definitely, we know, tends to affect people of color more so. And so those are the things, those are the questions that I think, if they're not answered on the back end in the clinical research, then the marketing department has to do some double duty in order to help practitioners and patients feel comfortable that this drug is even for me.
Exactly, exactly. And there's the dilemma, because a lot of these well, they're called CROs, which are just clinical research organizations or contract research organizations. These are companies that contract with pharmaceutical companies to handle the management of their clinical trials. And pharmaceutical companies as well are so accustomed to using physicians over and over again, because they want this medication to hit the market so fast that they use these same physicians as opposed to looking for new physicians, of various ethnicities to, perform the clinical trials, to conduct the clinical trials at their facilities. And we've got to get away from that, because the main way that we're going to, actually achieve diversity is to actually use these physicians. And I only know of one company that's really been active in trying to do that, or at least do more of it. And that happened actually during the COVID trials, because I don't know, can I name the company? Okay.
Let's not.
But yes, so Moderna, okay, forget about the delay. Okay. but because in COVID, I mean, we know that most people who are working in those, jobs that they just could not work remotely, who are actually out there in the fields, who are doing that, most of those people are going to be, people of different ethnicities, such as African Americans and Hispanics and this sort of thing. So they're, more prone to get COVID. So it was only fair that we should have sought a more diverse patient population for those trials,
Right.
and
No, I imagine that it almost sounds like, and you probably have heard of this phenomenon, especially in pharmacy, where you're talking about the need for infusion of new ethnic minority investigators. And so it almost sounds like when you say,
right,
companies tend to go with investigators they've already used, that they know, that they have proven track record. It almost sounds like which comes first, because it's like oncology. They're like, we want people with oncology experience, but in order to have oncology experience, somebody has to give you the opportunity to gain the experience. So if we want
exactly,
investigators who have
exactly,
experience, we still have to give the ability for new investigators to gain the experience so that we can diversify the
exactly.
investigator population and ultimately diversify the patient clinical trial populations.
Yeah, that's so true. And right now, there are several HBCUs that are working to educate minority physicians so that they can become investigators for clinical trials. But that challenge still is going to be finding companies who are willing to take naive physicians and actually utilize them to perform the trials.
And
And
training.
so this is why we have to really be right, exactly. So, we have to really, keep pressing and advocate so that they're willing to do this, because if we want to reduce the health disparities, this is a crucial step. It's a
Yes.
crucial step.
See, I told y'all, Myra is a prolific writer.
Yeah.
She's a staunch advocate for diversity in clinical trials, and I think is a great contact and a great resource, because the question that I often get, not only from pharmacy students, but I get this question from pharmacists who are looking to make a shift in their career, and they say things like, well, I'm not really sure what I want to do, and I'm not really sure what direction I go in. I think that the area of clinical trials in many different aspects, as you alluded to, you're going to be writing about in this upcoming fall issue, is a place that they may want to look and consider.
I agree. I agree. When I first heard about it, I was, very excited because I honestly don't, well, I went to pharmacy school a long time ago, but I didn't learn about it in school. I didn't learn about, clinical trials and exactly what it entailed or how I, as a pharmacist, could actually work in clinical research, and so it was very exciting, and it was definitely something that was just new. But for me, back then, it was just like, this is something I really want to do because I went into pharmacy in the first place just because I really wanted to help people and improve their quality of life. And I feel that clinical research, like I said, is very rewarding because when you're actually able to work on a clinical trial and that drug is approved, then there's just a special sense of satisfaction that comes with that.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that it's
Definitely.
definitely something that people should consider. Yeah.
So while I know that you have many irons in the fire, so I know that you obviously have graciously accepted to be one of the contributing authors for PharmaSis Magazine, but you also have a pretty sizable group on Facebook of people in the clinical research field. So tell us a little bit about that. I want you to be able to plug your group. So if somebody's looking for a place to get connected, learn more about clinical research, they can look up your group on Facebook.
The group is called Clinical Research Beginnings, and the group was actually formed by someone else, and she decided to retire. But when she had the group, it was basically supposed to teach new people who wanted to assume the role of what's called a clinical research associate. But I decided to expand the group. So because everything is always a learning experience, and so I want people to be able to broaden their horizons. So even for anybody who's new in the clinical research role you want to work in, we have this group, and we have some people who are seasoned, experienced, who can share their knowledge and expertise to those who are trying to enter the field or those who are new to the field, in each of the various roles. We also are, try to do postings. We share any type of postings that we hear about, for companies, particularly those companies that are looking for people with little to no experience, so that we can try to help them to get a start. We offer advice on, how to prepare for interviews, how to, increase your interviewing skills. Just different tips on, different things that you should do. But, but the main thing is, even once you're experienced, sometimes you just need somebody to guide you if you want to do a new therapeutic area, just like you were talking about oncology. That's a big thing. And people are always saying, well, we don't want you because you don't have the oncology experience, but nobody wants to give it to you. But we have people within our group who, have the oncology experience and basically are helping people, by sharing with them different platforms where they can go to, obtain the education necessary so that they can say that they're more proficient in that field, and guide them, because it's very good, so it just tries to help in aspects.
So I'll take a moment to show you. We've had a couple of people on and off during the live because I realize this is still during some people's work hours. But let's see, we have Peggy Riggins, who's a pharmacist out of Chicago, Illinois, who says, "We're looking beautiful, great discussion." She apparently just shared this information with her network. And then she said, "Loving the advocacy." So I just wanted you to be aware of some of the comments that we had, and there'll definitely be more people who will watch this after the fact. So we've had a couple people come and go while we've been live. It's if hopefully anyone who has been watching or will watch this later understands why I was so excited. Number one, for Myra to be a contributing author for the magazine, but then number two, because she has so many years of experience, and her sphere of influence and her knowledge of just clinical research in general, clinical research with regard to the ethnic imbalance in both investigators and in patients, and just even clinical research, the what's needed to know to break in. So I'm excited because, like I said, I know that there are pharmacy students as well as pharmacists who are looking to make changes in their career journey or their career path. And they always want to know, well, how do I break into that? How do I get started? What's my first step? And so which is why I wanted you to share about your group. So one of your first steps can be, one, connecting with Myra, two, also connecting with her group on Facebook, and we'll definitely make sure that we share that information again. But then three, also, following her and reading her writing, because that level of passion that you hear in her conversation is the same passion that comes across in her writing. And I just really believe that the world of clinical research has yet to see all that they're going to see from Myra Fonville, because I've just been amazed at the level of knowledge, and as well, as Peggy said, an advocacy that you have for this area of science.
Well, thank you. I definitely try. I'm very passionate about it because, as I said, it's one of the steps that's going to help us to reduce the disparities that we now face in healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be able to participate, and there need to be more of us actually advocating for this and educating the community, because
Right.
that's the first step. Is to because I say one of the things that I say is that a lot of us, and not just African Americans, but Native Americans, Hispanics as well, we suffer from like what's called generational trauma because of some of the atrocities that occurred in the past, with regard to exploitation, with us, and it goes well beyond Tuskegee. Everybody knows about Tuskegee, but it goes well
Yeah.
beyond Tuskegee, you know.
Right. And
You
one of
know,
the things I
a
had
lot
an
of people are aware. Go ahead.
I had an opportunity last year to write a post for ASCP because I chaired the committee for diversity and inclusion in healthcare that ASCP has. And so at the time that I was the chair, I had an opportunity to write a post on something that was passionate. We charged all of the group members to do that. And one of the things that I found out in preparing my post was also the aspect of clinical research, in that diseases and disorders that are not as common, that affect ethnic groups, are not studied as often either. So the example that I'll give you is fibroids, and that we know that women definitely, women of all ethnicities can have fibroids, but we know that women Black women have them more frequently, and they're more prevalent in Black women, but
Right.
yet there's not a lot of clinical trials necessarily for that area of research, because mm, more than likely it's a Black woman's problem. And so that's the other piece of
Right.
clinical research, is that outside of major disease states, diabetes, lupus, we talked about, the diseases that impact ethnic minorities almost exclusively, those don't seem to be studied as often either.
Right. Right. Exactly. Sickle cell,
Right,
those sorts of things.
right. And it's
So
not
it's
because
true, because
it's, go ahead.
yeah. No, I was gonna say, unfortunately, healthcare has become more of a business. So if it's something that these pharmaceutical companies find that's gonna be profitable, then there's no need for them to do any research in it. So it's like, oh, it's only it mainly affects this number of people, which that's not enough for us to make enough money off of. So what's the point? And we have to, which is another reason why we actually have to start advocating. We have to start pushing. We have to start saying, hey, look, somebody's to step up on our behalf.
Right.
So there are a few physicians out here who are doing that, but for the most part, you know, if it's not lucrative enough, people aren't really vested in actually encouraging that pharmaceutical companies make that change.
Right, right. And therefore, that leaves that population to deal with whatever the ailment is that primarily affects them pretty much the best way they can. Not saying that nothing's ever approved, but it's not a huge area of interest for research because, like you said, not enough people are impacted. So, with that, Myra, let me ask you, what's next for you? Like, we Peggy left a message here saying that you definitely have shared some hidden gems, and she's going to be connecting you to her tribe. I knew that when people could
Thank you.
hear you, they would want to be like, "Oh, how do I find her?" So first, tell us what's coming up, what's new for you, what's going to be next for you or is it a continuation of what you've been working on?
Oh, for right now, basically just a continuation of what I've been working on. I'm hoping that maybe by spring, maybe I'll shift my focus a little bit and surprise everybody with a new business venture. But for right now, it's just going to be just more advocating for more diversity in clinical trial participants, more diversity in physicians conducting the clinical trials, and more and advocating more for more education about clinical research within the communities.
Right.
So
All right.
that's what's most important to me right now.
Okay. Tell the audience, I forget the delay too. Tell the listening audience the
Yeah.
best way for them to connect with you, to get in contact with you, if they want to have you come and speak to their group, if they want to introduce you to contacts in the clinical research arena. Tell the audience the best way for people to connect with you.
The best way I would say is LinkedIn. I'm on
Okay.
LinkedIn and just using my name, Myra Fonville. So you can just find me on LinkedIn, and we can go from there. Just send me a request if you need to reach out to me to find out more information, or if you want my email address or whatever. So just connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, Myra, it has been my pleasure. Number one, to interview a fellow rattler. Number two, to interview another brilliant woman in pharmacy. And then number three, to interview someone as bold and passionate as you are about clinical research and all of the things that we've talked about today, and all of the areas that need attention and need someone to say, hey, this isn't the best that we can do better. So it is my honor to interview you so that we can get more exposure, more of what you're doing out. You want to definitely follow Myra, as I said, online on social platforms, as well as catch her first column article in the fall edition of PharmaSis Magazine, which will be coming up really soon. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you again. And I know this is not going to be the last time that we have a live where we talk about what's going on. So as you alluded to the spring, I can't wait for us to talk again in the spring.
Very good. Very good. I'm looking forward to it as well.
All right. Well, thank you. And I appreciate you being here today. And I look forward to the next time we catch up. Bye.
Thank you, Jerika. Bye-bye.